At the beginning of the movie, we find out that in the U.S., a civil war rages with Texas and California, forming the Western Forces Militia, and Florida its own group. The president, in his third term, claims victory is near due to loyalist states' defense, but doubts persist. The war photographer Lee Smith, watching his speech in New York, notices a city bombing. The next day, Lee and journalist Joel head downtown to cover a water protest. Given bright vests, Lee joins a protest crowd for photos. Police clash violently, but Lee persists, unfazed. Jessie, a young photographer, is injured. Lee rescues her, learning Jessie admires her work. Lee shields Jessie from a bomb blast caused by an armed woman in the crowd, capturing aftermath photos. Shocked, Jessie takes a photo too, determined not to appear less capable. At their hotel, Lee, Joel, and mentor Sammy discuss options amidst slow Wi-Fi. Rumors of a July 4th attack for historical significance emerge, but credibility is uncertain. Power outage occurs. Common since war began. Hotel generator activates. Sammy learns Lee and Joel aim to traverse war zones for DC, not frontline coverage, seeking the president's elusive interview. Journalists face danger near the White House. Sammy deems their plan risky, but knows a safe route to DC, hinting at his own motives to go. Sammy insists on going to Charlottesville's front lines and needs a ride. Initially concerned about his age, Lee eventually agrees. Later, Lee's warned about elevator risks due to power outages. Jessie returns Lee's vest, grateful. Lee encourages Jessie to keep it and advises on a helmet. Learning Jessie aspires to be a war photographer and views Lee as a hero. Lee tries to relax in a bath, but is haunted by past war horrors she's documented. Death, destruction, torture, feeling helpless. Next morning, preparing to leave, Lee finds Jessie in the car. Joel challenges Lee's inconsistency about Sammy, noting journalists' varied ages. Lee agrees to take Jessie to Charlottesville with Sammy. They depart amidst reminders to stay alert, navigating roads cluttered with abandoned cars. At a checkpoint, soldiers check their IDs before allowing passage. During the trip, Sammy and Joel plan interview questions, including sensitive topics like disbanding the FBI and airstrikes on Americans. They stop at a guarded gas station needing fuel, negotiating with armed men reluctant to share. Lee persuades with Canadian currency. Jessie, noticing something, investigates with a man following. Lee follows and discovers two tortured men hanging nearby, shocking Jessie. A gunman at a gas station explains they have debated what to do with two thieves still alive. He lets Jessie decide. She freezes. Lee distracts him by photographing the scene. On the road, Jessie regrets not taking photos, questioning her role. The group explains it is part of journalism. Jessie vows to be braver. They hear ineffective presidential speeches on the radio amidst widespread destruction. Lee spots a crashed helicopter, stopping for Jessie to photograph. While photographing, Jessie apologizes for being a burden, revealing her father's denial on his farm troubles her. She asks Lee about photographing her if she were shot, but Lee lets her draw her own conclusions. That evening, the group rests, watching distant gunfire. Lee reflects on her past war coverage as a warning, now confronted with immediate violence. Sammy notices Lee's wavering faith in journalism, influencing her tough stance on Jessie. Joel reassures Jessie after the trauma, offering comfort. They camp outside that night. The next day, they investigate the gunfire area. Lee and Jessie photograph two warring groups with a man caught between. A smoke grenade offers cover, but the man is shot trying to flee. His bleeding is captured on camera. Teammates try unsuccessfully to save him as Jessie documents his death. They enter a building, witnessing a bleeding man shot dead despite pleas for help. Jessie watches in shock as the team continues. Joel interacts casually with fighters, while soldiers capture and execute enemies. Jesse documenting it all. Sometime later, the journalists reach a refugee camp. All the tents are full, so they will have to sleep in their car. While Jessie develops her pictures the old-fashioned way, she continues to bond with Lee, who explains her parents are also on a farm, pretending nothing is wrong. When Jessie finally looks at her pictures, she's disappointed that they do not look good. But Lee reassures her that this is normal. Only 1 out of every 30 photos will be really good. Jessie eventually finds an excellent picture of the dying man, and Lee compliments her work. That night, the group relaxes with other refugees before facing more horrors in the morning. Their journey continues as the journalists witness the ongoing death and destruction along the roads. Jessie takes more pictures, making sure to capture the faces of her friends in the shots for added impact. Eventually, they arrive at a town that looks completely normal, with people hanging out on the streets and peace all around. They stop at a clothing store and ask the clerk what is happening. The clerk explains that their town has chosen to ignore the war. Jessie convinces Lee to try on a dress, saying that being at war does not mean she cannot have nice things. She compliments Lee's appearance and takes a picture of Lee smiling because it is the first time she's seen it. Afterwards, Lee returns to Sammy, who points out there are armed men on the rooftops. He also mentions that this peaceful life would not have suited them because it is too boring. Sometime later, the group discovers an abandoned circus with a dead man lying in the middle of the road. Lee scans the area with her camera zoom, but does not see anyone. Joel decides to move forward, but as soon as they pass through the entrance arch, their car window gets shot. Panicking, Joel accelerates and drives over the body until he finds a safe spot near a truck to stop. There, they find 2 soldiers in camouflage who are waiting for the shooter in the house to reveal themselves. As the journalists move around to cover this incident, the shooter fires at them but misses. Jessie and Lee take pictures while Joel tries to interview the soldiers, wanting to know which side they and the shooter are on. However, the soldiers do not belong to any team. They are just 2 men trying to kill someone who wants to kill them in return. After waiting for a while, the soldiers finally capture the shooter, and the group can leave safely. Sometime later, the journalists notice a car speeding to catch up with them. Worried, Lee slows down to let the car pass. However, the car pulls up beside them, and a guy screams at them, startling them. Thankfully, it is just a prank, and these guys turn out to be Tony and Bohai, fellow journalists and friends of Joel. It turns out that during their night at the hotel, Joel got drunk and told Tony where they are going. Tony also reveals Joel had flirted with Jessie. Tony is so excited to see them that he climbs through the window and joins them in the car, saying they are more fun. Jessie is impressed and tries the same trick, ending up in the other car. Bohai likes her more than Tony and speeds up to drive away with Jessie. Lee is worried, even though Tony says Bohai is trustworthy. Her anxiety grows when they lose sight of the other car ahead of them. Suddenly, a military vehicle passes by, forcing Lee to swerve off the road to avoid a collision. Fortunately, she stops just before hitting a tree. They quickly get back on the road and find Bohai's car abandoned near a farm with its doors open. The group investigates and finds Bohai and Jessie captured by loyalist gunmen, kneeling while bodies are dumped into a large grave. Sammy notes these gunmen are not regular soldiers, as they are doing this secretly. Joel believes their press IDs will protect them. Lee, Joel, and Tony approach the gunmen, explaining that Bohai and Jessie are part of their journalist team, claiming they are headed to Charlottesville to cover a story about a university reopening. Without hesitation, the lead gunman shoots Bohai, shocking Jessie and bringing Tony to tears. The gunman demands to know where they are from, so Lee, Joel, and Jessie mention their home states. However, when Tony says he is from Hong Kong, he also gets shot. Everyone panics. Sammy arrives in the car and hits the soldiers with it, knocking them into the grave. Jesse accidentally falls in too and has to climb over the bodies to get out. Joel helps her, and they all get back in the car to drive away, ignoring the last gunman trying to shoot them as they escape. On the road, Jesse and Joel break down, and Jesse even throws up. They only manage to travel a mile or two before Sammy says he cannot drive anymore, and they realize he's been shot. They move him to the back seat, and Joel takes over driving, speeding through a burning forest. Eventually, they reach the WF military base in Charlottesville, where they see a flag with only 2 stars. Sadly, Sammy has died. Joel shouts into the wind as soldiers take Sammy's body away in a box. Lee looks at a picture she took of Sammy's body, but decides to delete it. Shortly after, their journalist friends inform them that most of the Loyalists have surrendered, leaving Washington, D.C. poorly defended except for a few soldiers. The president's death is imminent, meaning their interview won't happen. Joel is very upset because it feels like Sammy died for nothing. Lee and Jesse take a moment to mourn together, and Jesse admits these past days have been the scariest and yet the most intense of her life. Later, while Lee cleans Sammy's blood off the car, the trio decides to join the WF so they can report on their attack on the White House. Despite many Loyalists surrendering, there are still enough of them fighting in the streets. As the WF attacks the Lincoln Memorial, the journalists follow the soldiers through the area. Jesse takes many powerful pictures, but Lee freezes due to her PTSD. Joel helps her refocus when a tank and helicopter clear the streets, allowing them to continue moving. The soldiers position themselves on different rooftops to create a defensive line, while the journalists hide behind an armored vehicle to cover the story. Suddenly, an explosion forces the armored car to move away, so the group runs to find cover. Jessie is slower because she keeps taking pictures, especially one of a man on fire. She also captures shots of a tank breaking through the wall around the White House. Lee is still struggling and crying, so Joel has to keep urging her forward. Nearby, another journalist and her cameraman are recording everything. Just then, they spot Secret Service agents escorting the president out of the White House and into a car. 3 vehicles leave the area and are immediately surrounded by soldiers on the streets who shoot everyone inside. Jessie continues taking photos, but Lee suspects it is a decoy and pulls her friends into the White House to find the real president. Some soldiers notice and follow them. Inside the White House, they discover a few bodies but little else. Soldiers swiftly arrive and conduct a thorough search, discovering an agent surrendering in the conference room. Lee takes photos with Jessie. The agent proposes negotiating the president's surrender to a neutral country, but is shot by soldiers. More agents fire in corridors. Journalists document deaths. They advance, gunning down Loyalists. Jessie risks a photo in a hallway. Lee shields her and is fatally shot. Shocked, Jessie is urged to the Oval Office by Joel. Soldiers surround the president. Joel delays for a quote. The president pleads, soldiers shoot him, ending the war. Jessie's final photo shows soldiers posing with the president's body, and the movie ends here.